Okay, let's try and unpack this. How does a frog, a car tire, and human legs just walking down a street become a huge internet thing?
Right. It sounds completely bizarre.
Totally. And that's exactly where we're jumping in for this deep dive today.
Yeah, we are plunging headfirst into the wonderfully strange world of Italian brain rot memes.
What?
And we're going to focus specifically on one of the earliest, maybe most well-known examples, Boneca Ambalabu,
Right?
a character that just perfectly sums up this whole weird phenomenon.
Italian brain rot. I mean, the name alone catches your attention. For anyone who hasn't tumbled down this rabbit hole, what exactly are we talking about?
Think of it like internet surrealism, but maybe cranked up to 11. These memes, they often use these really bizarre images, a lot of them AI-generated,
Ah.
which leads to these completely unexpected combinations, stuff that just doesn't belong together. And they often get paired with narratives that are just nonsensical, or they stop abruptly. It creates this feeling of, like, delightful digital chaos. It's not just random noise, though. It taps into this desire for the unexpected, a shared sort of understanding of internet absurdity, almost like Dadaism, but for the digital age, maybe.
Huh. That actually makes a weird kind of sense. So at the center of this chaos today, we have Boneca Ambalabu. You said it's an early one. Tell me about it, and what sources are we digging into?
Yeah, so for this deep dive, we pulled info from the Italian brain rot wikis. They have pages on Boneca Ambalabu and, like, related characters.
Okay.
Then there's Scabidi Times articles, which actually try to make sense of the lore, which is often pretty absurd.
Right. Good luck with that.
Exactly. And know your meme, just for the broader context of how memes spread. So our mission really is to understand the origins, the meaning, or maybe the fantastic lack of meaning, and the sort of cultural background of Boneca Ambalabu. And by looking closely at this one, we hope you get a clearer picture of the whole brain rot meme thing. But what's really interesting right from the start is that a lot of these Italian brain rot memes, like Boneca Ambalabu, actually have strong Indonesian roots.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, which leads to this fascinating cross-cultural mix-up.
All right, so paint the picture for me. What does Boneca Ambalabu actually look like?
Okay, so picture a frog's head, just sitting right on top of a car tire.
A car tire.
Yeah, car tire is the torso. And then instead of, more tire or frog legs, it has human legs.
Human legs.
Human legs, usually shown just like mid-stride, walking down a city street in broad daylight. It's just this really jarring visual.
Definitely.
And here's where it gets even weirder.
Yeah.
Despite looking almost, comical, the wikis and articles often describe it as an evil entity.
An evil entity that looks like that.
Yeah, one that terrorizes society.
Mm.
That contrast is part of the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, that's immediately grabbing. So who unleashed this peculiar creature onto the internet?
Okay, so the origin seems to trace back pretty clearly to a TikTok user, Fuscabrino. They posted the image first on February 2nd, 2025.
Okay, pretty specific.
Yeah, and interestingly, this same creator is apparently behind other early brain rot characters, like Burpatipim and Frigo Camelo.
Ah, so like a founding figure of this particular style.
Seems that way. It puts Boneca Ambalabu right at the start of this wave.
And the name itself, Boneca Ambalabu, it's definitely a mouthful. Any clue what it means?
Well, Boneca's pretty straightforward. That's Indonesian for doll.
Okay, doll.
Ambalabu, though. That seems to be totally made up. Sources like the Scabidi Times suggest it might be a mashup, like a portmanteau.
Of what?
Possibly ambatukum, which was a phrase that got popular in Greamy Bowl memes back around 2022.
Oh, right, I remember that phase.
And Labubu,
Yeah.
which is a brand of Chinese collectible toys, those little dolls with the bunny ears.
Huh. So, a nonsensical, doll-related name. Fits the theme, I guess. Now, the Scabidi Times also mentioned something interesting. That was around before the frog tire thing. What's that about?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is like a really crucial piece of the puzzle. The name Boneca Ambalabu and the sound that eventually got stuck to our frog tire friend.
Yeah.
They were originally tied to these other weird doll edits, specifically edits featuring Dreamy Bull's face on dolls.
No way.
Yeah, so before the frog tire visual even existed, the Boneca Ambalabu sound was being used with those bizarre doll videos.
So the frog tire creature basically just inherited the name and the soundtrack from a completely different meme.
Pretty much. It's wonderfully convoluted, isn't it?
It really is. And just to add another layer of confusion, you mentioned Indonesian roots, despite being called Italian brain rot. The name and the original audio are Indonesian.
Exactly. And that cross-cultural borrowing, you see it again and again in this quote-unquote Italian brain rot universe. There are other characters like Tung Sahur and Sahur.
Okay.
Their names are clearly Indonesian, too. It just shows how fluid internet trends are, right? Ideas just jump across borders and languages super easily.
Wild. Okay, let's talk about that audio then. This sinister sound. What's actually saying, and where did it come from originally?
Right, so the audio usually has this Indonesian voiceover. It talks about Boneca Ambalabu being evil, disturbing society, and scientists trying to figure out how to stop it.
Dramatic.
Yeah, the Italian Brain Rot Wiki has the original Indonesian and an English translation. It goes something like, Boneca Ambalabu, the evil entity that has been disturbing society lately, makes scientists think hard to find a way to deal with it. One of them's a famous scientist.
And then
And then it just cuts off abruptly.
a cliffhanger. But you said this audio wasn't originally for the frog tire guy.
Correct. The sources are pretty clear on this.
Right.
The audio clip was actually lifted from an older video, probably from around October 2024.
Yeah.
And that video featured a Labubu doll
Let me guess.
with Dreamy Bull's face photoshopped onto it.
Of course, it always comes back to the weird doll edits.
It seems so. So the sound belonged to those uncanny doll things first, not the frog tire hybrid.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We have an Indonesian name referencing a doll trend. We have Indonesian audio from a different doll trend, all attached to an AI frog tire human, and it's called Italian brain rot.
You got it. It's just peak internet absurdity.
Yeah.
Glorious,
It really is.
And this deliberate mismatch, right? This complete lack of internal logic. That's kind of the whole point of brain rot memes.
Right.
The fact that it doesn't make sense isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's part of the appeal, especially for the community that's into this stuff. It's like a shared joke about how weird things can get.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, Boneca Ambalabu isn't just a static image, right? I saw stuff about it being in fan-made battle.
Oh yeah, absolutely. These brain rot battles are a huge part of how the meme lives online, especially on TikTok. One really notable fight was against Frigo Camelo,
Who we mentioned earlier, the same creator.
the very same, and Oviu Scabrino's other creation. So, in this video battle, Frigo Camelo actually looks like he's winning at first. He somehow grabs Boneca Ambalabu's tongue.
It's Tung. Okay.
Okay.
That sounds unpleasant, even for a creature made of frog and tire.
Right, but here's the kicker. Frigo Camelo tries to freeze Boneca Ambalabu, but the effect somehow backfires completely.
How?
It freezes Frigo Camelo's
Nice.
wallet instead. Boneca Ambalabu doesn't really do anything heroic. It just wins because the other guy messes up spectacularly.
Yeah. Victory by incompetence.
Exactly. And the Skibidi Times actually points this out. This victory by accidental fail is apparently a common and much-loved trope in these Italian brain rot battles.
I kind of love that, like an anti-hero who just stumbles into winning. Were there other big fights?
Yeah, another significant one was against Trallalero Tralala, another one of these early popular figures.
Okay.
And the lore around this fight, which came from a TikTok by @iBrotherBrain, actually gets a bit, well, still bizarre, but almost narrative. Apparently, before becoming the frog tire thing, Boneca Ambalabu was just a normal frog with a family.
Ah, frog family.
Yeah, but then their car, while it was getting refueled or something, had an oil leak, rolled away, and the frog family got separated tragically.
Oh, wow.
And the implication is that this trauma somehow caused the transformation into Boneca Ambalabu.
That's unexpectedly sad and still totally weird. So how did the battle go?
So they meet on a beach, Boneca Ambalabu and Trallalero Tralala. They fight. Boneca Ambalabu gets a few hits in, apparently.
Yeah, some offense at least.
But ultimately, Trallalero Tralabu is just stronger and overpowers him, forcing Boneca Ambalabu to retreat. So a definite loss in that fight.
The Italian brain rot wiki mentions its battle prowess too, right? And it seemed underwhelming.
Yeah, it reinforces this idea. Despite being called an evil entity, it seems pretty weak in these battles. Its main attack is listed as just sticking at its tongue.
Sticking its tongue out, that's its weapon.
Apparently so. Which, again, just adds to the absurdity, right? This disconnect between the ominous description and the, frankly, kind of pathetic reality.
So, Boneca Ambalabu, Indonesian name, Indonesian sound, frog tire body, part of Italian brain rot, not great in a fight. How does this all connect to the bigger picture of brain rot?
Right, so Boneca Ambalabu is seen as a really key early example of what people now call Indonesian brain rot.
Okay, so that's like a subgenre.
Exactly. A regional variation within the bigger Italian brain rot trend. And Indonesian brain rot, like the name suggests, is typified by these weird, often AI-made creatures, but specifically with Indonesian names and, importantly, Indonesian voiceovers in the audio.
Gotcha.
Like those other characters we mentioned, Tung 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 Sahur and Tata Ta Sahur. They fit squarely into that Indonesian brain rot category, too.
And how is Indonesian brain rot different from the main Italian version?
Well, they both share that core of bizarre AI visuals and nonsensical themes, right? But the Italian brain rot stuff often uses Italian text-to-speech voices.
Oh.
And these voices will often rhyme the character names with completely absurd statements, sometimes about religion, sometimes just random stuff. Indonesian brain rot, like we saw with Boneca Ambalabu, leans on actual spoken Indonesian narration, often with that slightly unsettling or dramatic delivery.
So the language of the absurdity is a key difference. What other core things make something brain rot, whether it's Italian or Indonesian?
There are a few common threads. It usually starts with that AI-generated image, mashing up things that don't belong together, animals and objects, weird anthropomorphic stuff.
Right.
Then you layer on narratives that are either just nonsense or kind of creepy or cut off suddenly. No real logic.
Uh-huh.
And the audio is vital. Specific sounds, often repetitive, sometimes kind of eerie, they get tied to specific characters.
Mm-hmm.
And platforms like TikTok, with the short video format, have been absolutely essential for how quickly these things spread and get remixed and evolve.
You've mentioned Tung Sahur a couple of times now. Seems important. What's the story with that one?
Yeah, Tung Sahur is another really big early Indonesian brain rot character. Visually, it's usually shown as like an anthropomorphic wooden kentongan drum.
A Kintongan, what's that?
It's a traditional Indonesian slit drum used for signaling things like calls to prayer or community alerts.
Okay.
And sometimes this drum creature has a face, maybe like Thomas the Tank Engine, weirdly, or sometimes like a Japanese Aoni mask. And it often carries a bat.
A drum creature with a bat, got it. What about the name Tung Sahur?
Tung 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 is just the sound, right? Onomatopoeia for hitting the kentongan drum.
Makes sense.
And sahur, that's the pre-dawn meal Muslims have during Ramadan before they start fasting for the day. So the name directly links to the cultural practice of using that drum sound to wake people up for sahur.
Okay, so a very specific cultural reference point. Is there like lore attached to it? A story?
Yes, and it's pretty specific and well-known in the community. The story goes that if you're called for sahur 3 times and you don't wake up or respond, tung 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 sahur will come for you. It's often shown as being really powerful, too. Sometimes in the fan battles, it can even transform into, like, a giant wooden gorilla or something.
Wow. So it's like the spooky enforcer of the Ramadan alarm clock. And you mentioned Tata Sahur being related.
Yeah, Tata Ta Sahur is another Indonesian brain rot figure tied to the Sahur tradition. Looks totally different, though. It's usually shown as a teapot.
A teapot.
Yeah, a teapot with human arms and legs, often with this really traumatized-looking stare and steam coming out of its spout.
Okay.
The ta-ta-ta part is also onomatopoeia, but this time it mimics the sound of a bedug, which is another traditional Indonesian drum also used for the Sahur wake-up call.
So different drum sound, different animated object, same basic job.
The core lore is very similar, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That Tata Sahur also shows up if you ignore the Sahur call 3 times. Most people who follow this stuff seem to think Tung Sahur and Tata Sahur are related, like siblings, maybe.
Born from ignoring the alarm.
Exactly. And they often share similar eerie audio narration, too, which reinforces that connection. And interestingly, as Tung Sahur got more popular, it helped make this Russian song, Woya, also called The Sound of Your Fear, become a super common background track for these kinds of memes.
Adding another layer of unsettling vibes.
Absolutely.
It's really fascinating how these seemingly random things get woven together and develop their own weird internal logic. So bringing it back to Boneca Ambalabu, it feels like we've dissected its bizarre origins pretty well. What are your final thoughts on why this kind of deliberately meaningless stuff actually resonates?
Yeah, you nailed it with the meaning of the meaningless, because on the surface, Boneca Ambalabu and all this brain rot stuff, it just looks totally random, right? Illogical.
Completely.
But I really think the humor, the appeal, comes exactly from that, from breaking the usual rules of memes, messing with expectations.
So it's just the sheer unexpectedness, the absurdity is the point.
I think so, yeah. You know, in a world where everything online feels so curated and overloaded with information, something as intentionally nonsensical as Boneca Ambalabu can feel, I don't know, refreshing, maybe even cathartic.
Huh. Like a reaction against trying too hard to make sense.
Could be. Or just a form of internet surrealism that speaks to people, a way for online groups to connect over appreciating the truly bizarre. And like we saw with the battles and the lore, these things evolve so fast, collaboratively. It's like this constantly growing universe of digital oddities.
It's like the internet's collective subconscious just started dreaming up these weird creatures, and now we're all trying to figure out the delightful chaos together.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really captures that collaborative, unpredictable vibe of internet culture.
So wrapping up our deep dive into the wonderfully weird, we've met Boneca Ambalabu, the frog-tire human hybrid, born on TikTok, soaked in Indonesian naming and sound, but somehow a key player in Italian brain rot.
Despite its scary description, maybe not the best fighter, but known for that accidental win.
Right. And it's a perfect example of that cross-cultural mixing and the love of absurdity that defines brain rot, alongside its Sahur-focused Indonesian relatives Tung and Sahur.
Exactly. We've seen how all these mismatched pieces, the AI image, the unrelated audio, the Indonesian name, in an Italian-labeled trend, somehow come together to make Boneca Ambalabu uniquely, well, strangely compelling.
It definitely leaves you thinking, could these seemingly nonsensical brain rot memes actually be tapping into something deeper, like a reflection of cultural anxiety maybe? Or is it just a new kind of internet storytelling where, logic doesn't matter as much as the vibe and just iterating really fast?
It really makes you wonder what other bizarre corners of the meme world are out there waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, maybe you, listening, have your own theories about what it all means. It's definitely something to mull over.